Hello and welcome to Melomaniax, the podcast where we take unbiased deep dives into the biggest musicians and bands of all time. I'm Ashton.
And I'm Dallas. Today we are diving into one of the greatest songwriters of all time, Mr. Max Martin. But before we get too far into that, please don't forget to go ahead and like and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on our socials. We're on Instagram and TikTok. And hit us with those 5-star reviews wherever you're listening to this podcast, although we certainly appreciate Apple Podcasts and Spotify are kind of the front of the line there. And we've launched our Patreon. We have a $5 per month tier. It's going to get you access to a lot of cool perks like our Discord, where we're always sharing news articles and funny memes and videos and things like that. So, as well as the ability to vote on a potential future episode topic. So with that out of the way, let's dive into Max Martin.
Now, Max Martin, we've brought his name up a couple of times, but it might not be familiar to everybody, but it's basically almost impossible to not be familiar with his music. He's written 27 number one hit singles on the Billboard 100, second only to Paul McCartney's 32. And we're going to keep track of his number ones going forward on the show. Keep updating you guys, see if he can beat it.
I think he can beat Paul because, one, he's got time on his side.
Yep.
Two, another thing that just dawned on me right this second as you were saying that. So Paul McCartney has 32 hits, but if we look at the timeline of when Paul McCartney's hits were versus the timeline of when Max Martin's hits were, Max Martin's the king of today, dude. Paul McCartney was the king of yesterday.
Oh, for sure.
He just happened to knock it out of the park yesterday. You know what I mean? So he set the bar really, really high. But yeah. I'm not going to sit here and say Paul McCartney's done, but like, I'm not sure Paul McCartney's getting another number one. He's in his 70s, isn't he?
I wonder when his last number one hit came out, because I remember he does a lot of writing still, as far as, so some of the songs that might be associated to him, I might not know are associated to him, but I'm not sure when his last number one was. And I think you're right. It's been a while. And literally the only person in the interview when I was listening to Max talk, the only person he brought up as far as ending his reign of songwriting for a small amount of time was Pharrell. He was like, curse you, Pharrell. For like a certain amount of time.
Did Pharrell pass him or something?
No, there was just a break of years where hip hop, the sound changed and the format changed, and Max said, you're all wrong. It should be this. And then he ended up being wrong himself. It was another way. So he was, so I guess Pharrell ran a couple years of that kind of writing scene, which then made me go and look at Pharrell, who's been a producer since like the mid 90s. Crazy. We have to dive into that guy. He's been part of just as much music as Max.
He's done a ton of stuff.
Yeah, I was gonna say he's like a not even a great value version of Max, because Max writes so many number ones, but Pharrell does write a lot of top Billboard 100. Just he hasn't not nearly that number one success that Max has had. But Paul McCartney last number one hit, I bet it was with the.
I'm looking through it now. Like, he's done stuff. Obviously, like you said, he's done stuff with other people. I see Michael Jackson, Stevie Wonder.
But still, that's all in like 80s, 90s stuff. So he is.
I'm in the 90s now, and in the 90s, dude, the highest he got was 64.
Okay, so his stuff is
in
just
the 2000s,
pure old.
There's nothing. 2010s, nothing. Number 4 with Rihanna and Kanye West, 4 or 5 seconds. You remember that? You remember when that came out?
Oh yeah,
I remember 2015 because the meme went viral where someone was saying like, I don't know who this Paul McCartney is, but Kanye's about to blow him up. You know, all that stuff.
Oh my god.
And then the 2020s, yeah, dude, he hasn't had a number one since the 80s. It looks like, if what I'm looking at is comprehensive.
Gotcha. Well, then I'm pretty impressed then with Paul as far as 20 years then? Maybe, I guess, because the Beatles really were through the 60s, late 50s, but 60s, well, never mind, 60s, 70s, 80s. So you had 30 years and you got 32. And Max has been doing it for right around 30 years now, but he's so much younger than Paul is. And he's still evolving his sound with the times, so... He's known as the king of like, hey, I'm a pop artist and I need a number one, so I'm going to go to Max Martin. You know what I mean? And, people call
artists
him.
Are going to keep doing that. The other thing is Paul McCartney, yes, did write with other people, but most of those number ones were probably from his own stuff, you know, with Wings, the Beatles, and himself.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's a few exceptions there, where Max is known to only write with other people. He doesn't release his own music like that. So
that's true.
Obviously, he has a much higher chance because he can just sit at home in Sweden and, have a different artist every month. And that's 12 shots,
Well,
12 shots a year to get a number one. Like he's got a much higher hit percentage
and
or a chance rather.
Yeah. And as we go through the episode, you'll see every artist that I basically name it's not like they've worked with Max and they don't anymore. They most likely will work with Max on all future albums. So the chances of him, hitting another number one with all the artists he's worked with and will continue to work with are really in his favor. I could see him landing
and he only needs 5 more to tie and 6 to tie.
To yeah, I could see him hitting I could see him getting in the 40s potentially if he continues to do this, through his 60s, 70s or whatever. If he does it through his old age and keeps writing music,
that would be awesome. I'm rooting for Max. I've known about him for quite some time, and I'm a big fan. So anyway, I didn't mean to derail us. Let's we start all these episodes by going back to the beginning. So let's take it there.
Way to the beginning with old Carl Martin Sandberg, who was born February 26, 1971 in Stockholm, Sweden. And I haven't met them before, but shout out to my family members that I have living in Sweden on my dad's side. Woo!
That's cool.
Yep.
What percentage Swedish are you? Do you know?
I'd have to look it up. My great grandma was 100%. And then I believe my grandmother is still 100. Like is still 100%. Yeah, I've got it. It's got to be my highest percentage, I believe. Cuz it's. And
where does all your tanness come from? Because you don't have Swedish skin.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure. I've been wanting to do one of those
23andMe or something.
23andMe or whatever. It's just to see. But I don't know. Maybe on my mom's side. I'm not sure. But
that's scary.
Shout out to Sweden, baby. Yeah.
Giving your DNA to somebody.
Right. Just sending it off to a lab.
Here you go. Clone me, maybe.
Clone me.
And then send my clone to kill me. That can't be a crime. There's no precedent for that.
Exactly. That's
the judge is like, I guess it's murder. I
don't know. First time
they're doing all the DNA swabs and all the crime scene stuff, and they're like, this makes no sense. But himself killed himself.
It's a match, with himself.
Yeah,
that'd be.
But funny. He's wearing different shoes over here,
right?
The cops are literally just scratching their heads, like, I don't know. I've never seen anything like this.
Anyways, back to Sweden. Good old Sweden. Martin actually grew up in Stockholm. His mother was a middle school teacher and his father was a police officer. And Martin said that every Swedish home that had people born in the 40s in it all had like this certain collection of albums. And he said it was the best of Creedence Clearwater Revival, the Beatles' greatest hits. Apparently he said the album cover where they're on a balcony. There's like a red and a blue. Anyways, the Beatles' greatest hits, and then Elton John's Captain Fantastic and the Brown Dirt Cowboy. And then he said there was a Queen album that he couldn't remember and that they didn't really listen to a whole lot, but they had it. It was there. I'm assuming it'd be one of their earlier ones based on the times of these other albums. But as a teenager, he sang in a number of bands and finally settled as the front man in a glam metal band called It's Alive at the age of just 14 too. And he ended up dropping out of high school to pursue music. And his first stage name was Martin White. And It's Alive participated in the 1988 Swedish Rock Championship, which is basically like a nationwide battle of the bands. And they also landed a residency at a nightclub in Cyprus. And in 1991, Dave Constable of Mega Rock Records offered to produce a demo for them. And that demo would end up turning into their debut album, but would only have about 1,000 copies released as a free cover tape to the UK magazine Metal Forces. So if you have that album somewhere, it's probably worth a ton of money. Or nothing. Who knows?
I think so.
Only 1,000 copies.
So I guess things are only worth what people would pay for them.
True. But if it's I don't know, Max Martin's kind of building a legacy, so that could be something someday.
That's for maybe. Sure. Also, it's worth saying the It's Alive stuff was really good.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it
was surprisingly good, and also like you could hear the seeds of his kind of songwriting prowess in these songs. right? Where it's not just like nonsense. It's like hooky, structured arrangement. Like these are all things that he's known for now. You could kind of see a little bit of that in those really early songs. Also, he sang amazing.
Yeah, his singing was great.
It's always cool. Always cool to discover like a producer that can actually, you know, play really well or sing really well or something, you know.
It helps add a little more validity in the you know, why all these artists want to go work with him, because he can sing and play keyboard and stuff, you know, he can understand their music process a little easier.
Yeah,
and
sure.
But anyways, the little bit of exposure that they got from that initial album would end up landing them a record deal with Sharon Records. That's how I'm going to pronounce it. I don't know. Sharon.
That sounds good to me.
Cool. A BMG affiliate under producer Dennis Pop, and they released their second album, Earthquake Visions, in 1994, which is the one Dallas was just talking about.
That's the one we listened to, yeah.
That one was really good. It's not on Apple Music or anything. We had to go to YouTube, and it's just a compiled, 40 minutes of all the songs put together, but it slaps, man. It's good.
Yeah, really good stuff. Here's the problem. They released a glam metal album in 1994, which is the year Kurt Cobain died. So, like, glam metal has been dead for years at this point. You know?
They're competing with Steelheart.
You see that with a lot of bands. Yeah, Skid Row, Steelheart, they all came a little bit too late. And they did, you know, obviously big things, especially in the case of Skid Row, but it was just a little bit late on the back end of people caring about that kind of music, you know.
It's back to that Andre 3000, man. Your timing was off, unfortunately. For those bands. Just 5 years too late, I guess. But anyways,
crazy.
One thing I wanted to mention that he does on that Earthquake Visions album, he invented his famous "yow" lyric. I don't know if you.
Oh, really?
Yeah. You can hear him at it's one of the end of the verses. He goes "yow." It's like his very first one.
That's funny.
So if anyone's looking for the original "yow," but anyways, in the meantime, after their second album release, Martin was actually hired on by Sharon Studios a year before the album released, and it was his, like, at this job he learned the basics. Dennis Pop kind of took him under his wing as a mentor, and Dennis Pop was a DJ as well as a producer, so he took over some of the knowledge he had, you know, from being a DJ, he would bring into the studio. So I called it the DJ concept, but he was talking about how when you are a DJ on a floor with a lot of people dancing, the first 3 seconds of a song need to be instantly recognizable to keep people on the dance floor. Because if they have to wait and listen to what the song is, or they don't immediately know what it is, you'll lose your audience and they'll go sit down. So the DJ thing is you only want to have like songs that are instantly recognizable with the first couple of chords, which you'll see that become really familiar in Max Martin's music going forward. Where like every time a Max Martin song comes on, you're like, oh, I immediately know the song. So he talks about how the first 3 seconds of a song are the most important 3 seconds of a song. And like I said, he would definitely add that into his own writing style. And the two, Pop and Martin, would start co-writing and co-producing while he was working under Sharon Studios. And their first collaboration was on the Rednex song "Wish You Were Here" in 1994. It's a Swedish art. A lot of the early bands are just Swedish artists and bands.
Well, Rednex does Cotton Eye Joe, right?
I believe so. I was gonna say I do know Rednex. That was the first one, but like there's a little list afterwards of who they work with, and I just was like, yeah. I do believe you're right about that. Rednex doing Cotton Eye Joe, which is funny. But anyways, after they produced "Wish You Were Here" by them, they produced E-Type song "This Is the Way," and E-Type and Pop credited so Martin worked on the intro to the song and just, you know, on his own and sent it to them. Then those two, Pop and E-Type, credited a made-up producer name called Max Martin, and that's who they credited the intro to. And so Martin didn't even know about this until the printed records came back, and they're like, hey, there's your new name. So he didn't really...
That's crazy.
Yeah, right? Didn't even really get an option. They just kind of decided for him. But...
That's funny.
I mean...
So after that, he continued to work with Pop on a number of songs and albums, including Ace of Base's second album, The Bridge. That's pretty big. Yeah. Which was released in 95 and has sold over 6 million copies worldwide. They also worked on some albums with 3T, Army of Lovers, and Lila K. Leela? I'm gonna say
yeah.
Lila.
Lila sounds good.
Yeah, that sounds nice. And these are all Swedish artists, like we said. So I wasn't familiar with them. I don't think you were familiar with them.
Yeah, this was the group that I was like, I'm not sure.
Yep. It's also around this time that Martin would actually end up leaving It's Alive, and that's 1995. So it's kind of on to bigger and better things at this point.
Yep. So later in 95, Sharon Studios was hired by Zomba, a short-lived American label owned by Sony, to work on the Backstreet Boys' debut album called Backstreet Boys. And Martin worked on the song Quit Playing Games With My Heart, which he co-wrote with Herbie Critchlow. And that song would quickly go platinum and hit number 2 on the Billboard 100, which I was so shocked to see that Backstreet Boys never had a number 1 hit single.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Okay.
They constantly hit number 2, like constantly, but never got number 1. He then followed up.
Be annoying,
right? And he then followed up.
They were absolutely massive.
I know, right? That's why I was so shocked by that. But he followed up working on 2 songs from their next album, Backstreet's Back, and he helped produce "As Long as You Love Me" and "Everybody." Backstreet's Back, which hit number 4 on the Billboard 100. So basically, all the big Backstreet Boys songs he was a part of.
Yeah, he did. All the big ones we know for sure.
Yep.
That brings us to 97, where Martin would co-write and co-produce Robin's hits, Show Me Love and Do You Know What It Takes from her debut album, Robin Is Here. And both songs would chart at number 7 on the Billboard 100. So at this point, he doesn't have a number 1, but
he's already...
He's teasing it.
Right? Yeah. Right off the bat, too. A year later...
Yeah, that's crazy.
Right? A year later, in 98, Sharon Productions worked on albums by Five and Folker. And then Jessica had I'm trying to remember her exact name, but I think she just goes by Jessica, which is why it was confusing. But Jessica's first album, Jessica, the name of the album, so confusing. It's like, I just need a last name, but her artist name is Jessica, first album named Jessica. But anyways, it became an instant hit single or a hit with the singles Tell Me What You Like and How Will I Know Who You Are, both going platinum. And Pop would actually die of cancer that year in 98, and Martin took over as the director of Sharon Studios. And because of the lack of the other producer, he brought on Rami Jacob to give him a hand. And they were presented with this new artist, the 16-year-old they had a meeting with, and it was a 16-year-old Britney Spears. And about 2 months after Pop passed away, Martin landed his first Billboard number 1 single with Baby One More Time and Britney Spears. So his very first one was Britney Spears' debut single, which was actually originally titled Hit Me Baby One More Time, but America didn't want to run that because they thought it sounded like a domestic violence song. Love that. And
that's always weird because, like, I mean, you're gonna listen to the song. She says it in the song. You know what I mean? Like,
right. Well, that's just America, dude. They think so much, and they're always trying to not get hit with lawsuits and everything. I don't know. But so Martin had actually originally wrote that song for Backstreet Boys or TLC, but both groups actually rejected it and said no, thank you. And then the label tried to pass the song off to the band Five, but they also rejected it. Which I think is funny because when you listen to the song, I could totally hear like Backstreet Boys doing it. It's such a Backstreet Boys song because it's his
all of
style.
Max Merton's stuff at that time,
sounded the same.
They all had that same like kind of drum loopy boom, ga, boom, boom, ga, that kind of stuff. You know,
that's what was doing well on the radio. So like, I was just shocked that they passed it because I was like listening back to the song, imagining Backstreet Boys doing it, and I was like, dude, they would have still hit number 1 with this. They turned down their only chance at a number 1 single. I feel like, but anyways. When Britney had heard the song, she was super hyped and immediately was like, this is going to be a hit. So she could see it. And as for the writing process for this song, Martin recalled he was like laying in bed, like really tired, but at the same time, he had this like melody coming through his head and he was kind of like singing it. And he said at the time, there were no cell phones or anything. So he had this little like tape recorder. I can't remember what he called it, but you know, just a little record machine that you can save for later. And he remembers like getting up, and then he went to record like just a little bit, and then he went back to bed, and then was laying there still working on the song, and like got up again to go like make some changes and this back and forth. But anyways, he said when he was listening back, he just remembers by the last couple of recordings, he's just extremely tired, just like barely mumbling in the mic, like, hit me, baby, one more time. And then he said he can actually hear himself at the very end of the recording go, yeah, that's pretty good. And then just turns the recording off. Oh, I love that.
That's funny.
Dude, I love that, like assuring yourself, like, yeah, that was good.
Yeah, that's good. That's one.
That's good. That's going to be number one. While we continue to talk about his writing process, one of Martin's greatest inspirations was Prince, actually. We love Prince on the show. So he loved the way Prince would write music and definitely wrote some songs using something called Prince theory. And the way Martin describes the Prince theory, and I'm going to also give a little definition, and I quote, one theory of songwriting is that you can also sing the chorus melody as a verse. For instance, take I Want to Be Your Lover with Prince. The verse and the chorus of that song are exactly the same, but as a listener, you don't really notice since the energy of the chorus is completely different compared to the verse. Once the chorus comes, you feel like you've heard it before, and you've heard it in the verse, and it automatically creates a sense of familiarity. And he said Prince does this a lot. Like Let's Go Crazy does the same thing. And Max said he's used that trick a few times himself. And so like so one thing Prince would do, like he was saying, is take the same melody of the verse and chorus, and then the pre-chorus or the bridge would just go way off the rails. So that's what would split up the song. But then you'd always, like he said, when you get back to the chorus, it sounds familiar and it has like this effect when you listen to it. I don't know, but
yeah,
that was how he was breaking it down, and he liked to apply that to some of his songs, and it was one of his favorite things that Prince would do. And another thing Martin is known for is simplicity. I think you're going to like this. He loves to take the good parts of an artist and break them down to their most basic form so they can focus on storytelling and lyric writing. He's not a big fan of overdone vocals. He does not like to go out and do a bunch of vocal runs. He firmly believes that as a great singer, people will be able to notice you're a great singer even when you're singing the most basic notes and basic songs. He said all of it will shine through regardless. You don't have to go through, doing way too much and showing people like, I can sing really well, I promise. Like none of that is.
So he's probably never worked with Christina Aguilera then.
None of that is needed. Yeah, probably not. But yeah, that's
she's got to hit every note of the scale in every song.
Yep. Yeah, he would definitely not like that. He is not a fan. So he definitely likes very simple things. Simple and effective. That's just his way of doing things. And God damn it, it's worked for 30 years. So
there's got to be something to it, huh?
Yes, sir.
Let's get back to his collabs. So in 1999, Celine Dion released the song That's the Way It Is to help promote the release of her first greatest hits album. And she had collabed with Martin on the song, and it reached number 6 on the Billboard 100. And while we're on the subject of Celine, Martin also helped co-write and produce 3 songs from her 2003 album, which was entitled One Heart.
Yep. I didn't know he had worked with her. So that was one of the plenty of artists that pop up where I'm like, oh, I didn't know he worked with her or them.
I didn't know that either.
Because we know a lot of his number ones, but the ones that don't hit number 1, that's where it's like, oh. But anyways, continuing with working with the Backstreet Boys, he co-wrote and produced 7 of the 12 songs from their third album, Millennium, which was released May 18th, 1999. I definitely remember this CD.
That one.
Yeah, I was gonna say I definitely owned this on the CD.
They're wearing all white and all that stuff. Yeah.
Yep, for sure.
I saw that tour actually.
Did you?
Yeah, in Charlotte here.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yep, I saw Backstreet Boys and NSYNC, not together, but around that time period, because that was my favorite bands as a kid.
Yeah, that's sick. Yeah, I wonder where that CD is. It's so nostalgic looking at the album covers of a lot of these.
Oh yeah.
But of the 7 songs that Martin was a part of, the biggest one was I Want It That Way, which ended up being Backstreet Boys' most popular song to date. I believe that one hit number 2 on the charts. The album sold 1.1 million copies within the first week and broke the record for the most albums sold during a debut week. That is until another group called In Sync would break that record a year or 2 later. But we'll talk about that then. Couple more Backstreet Boys songs to mention. Lisa Miskovsky, I believe that's how you say it. She was in the studio for her own album and actually co-wrote the lyrics of the song Shape of My Heart with Martin and Jakob. And it was originally intended for her album, but Martin just didn't see it as a good fit and passed it on to Backstreet Boys, which became a really good song on their fourth album.
Yeah, that was I think their fourth album, and that song, I think that was like the only hit off that album, and it was kind of on the way out, because I remember as a kid Shape of My Heart coming along really late and being kind of like the last one.
Yep. Definitely the end on the downside of the
bell curve. Yeah. We definitely need an episode on Backstreet Boys, and NSYNC would probably be a part of that as well.
For sure.
Because I don't know if you knew this, the same guy created both of those bands.
Yep. I watched I don't think I've watched, I know you said there's a Backstreet Boys documentary. I watched some kind of documentary on that guy.
Yeah, Lou Pearlman.
Yeah, specifically on him.
He died in prison.
Yeah, I watched on him and all the things he did behind the scenes with Backstreet Boys and NSYNC, and
absolute genius marketer. Like, and actually it's, you would think, a creepy looking dude hanging out with a bunch of teenage boys went to prison for pedophilia or something, but it was nothing like that at all. It was way after the fact of all that. And he went to jail for being a part of a Ponzi scheme. So he was kind of a crook his whole life, but he was never, at least as far as we know, and as far as all these people that were there say, inappropriate or anything. But the documentary I recommend for the Backstreet Boys is the one they made, because it's them. It's a movie about them. Like, it's literally the words from their own mouths the whole time, and it's like, it's really, really cool. You learn a bunch of stuff that you would never know from just like behind the music or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Really cool stuff. So when we do the Backstreet Boys, which we should maybe do soon since we're on the Max Martin train, but they it's a great documentary.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna dive into that one. We'll get some Backstreet Boys research whipped up. But
there we go. Driving around listening to Backstreet Boys and NSYNC all week. Everybody's looking at you like, dude, what's wrong with this guy?
He's stuck. He's stuck.
He's stuck.
He's stuck.
You're
in
just like, has there been another band since? I haven't heard any other music since this came out.
Right? Oh God.
25 years of just
dude straight drove in straight from the 1998.
Yeah.
Anyways, let's talk about that other group, NSYNC. Martin was only part of co-writing one song of theirs, but his studio worked on a few of their albums and stuff. So his credit is with "It's Gonna Be Me," which is his second #1 single on the Billboard 100.
Oh man.
Yep. So remember how that debut album of Backstreet Boys sold 1.1 million albums in the first week? Mm-hmm. Well, NSYNC's No Strings Attached sold 2.4 million copies in its first week. And that album has since... Yep, I had this one as well. I remember it
clear as day.
And this one has gone diamond since. This album, I actually remember more so than the Backstreet Boys as far as the cover. This is the one with them as like puppets, right? Hanging by strings.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. How pissed would you be if you're the Backstreet Boys, dude?
Dude, I know.
That's like, your manager, your guy, your boy just creates another band that just dominates you.
and then your songwriter writes them a #1.
Yeah, well, Lou Pearlman's just like, oh, this worked once, I bet it works twice. And like, holy shit, he was right.
Oh yeah, for sure. No, but that one, that's crazy.
Yeah,
definitely,
that's nuts.
Definitely remember that one too.
Let's go through some of the awards he's won from all these hits. So, because he's pumping them out. So he was the first non-American citizen to win ASCAP's Songwriter of the Year in 1999. So I guess he's a member of ASCAP. Yep. And then followed up by winning the same award in 2000 and 2001. Just 3 in a row.
3 in a row. Yeah.
So that's amazing. But he would actually kind of go on a hiatus from the Billboard 100's #1 spot for quite a few years. So, if you remember, hip hop and pop are constantly evolving and changing. And in pop, a long career for a songwriter is like 3 to 5 years. Because, whatever genre or specialty you bring to the table, it's got about that long of a shelf life before the industry's moved on.
Yeah. So one thing with...
And not everyone can adapt.
Yeah.
So.
And one thing with different music genres, every genre is constantly evolving. But I'd say pop and hip hop specifically evolve faster on purpose. They're kind of more year to year with
Yeah.
their sound changes, whereas rock and stuff are more of a 5 to 10 year kind of lifespan.
Yeah, because with pop and hip hop, you get that attitude of like, oh, dude, that's so last week. Like you get that a lot more than you do in other genres, you know?
Yep, which makes the space so much harder to be successful in, which just adds so much more credit to what he's been able to do throughout his career, which is why he just stands above from the rest, because he's been able to write pop hits for 30 years. That's so unheard of.
Yeah, and they sound like, you know, not dated, they're fresh and they're unique and they're awesome every time.
Because you can listen to his first song, his first number one to his last, and it's so different, completely different. And you know, like you can tell how he's moved along with the times, but he still has his same writing processes that affect, you know. So it's just really cool.
Yeah, for sure.
Moving along, in 2000, Sharon Studios actually closed down because of the death of Dennis Pop. And in the meantime, Martin actually collaborated, you know, during this time where he didn't really have anything to be doing. He collaborated with John Bon Jovi and Richie Sambora to co-write the song It's My Life, which would appear on John Bon Jovi's 7th album as the lead single. I had no clue he was part of that song.
It's worth saying that song is what like brought Bon Jovi back to life, basically.
Right?
Like he was an 80s star, you know?
Yeah, for sure. With
and
the
then,
long
and then
hair
his
and
career,
stuff.
from what I remember, from not being that familiar with it, but knowing peripherally what's been going on, he kind of took a dive in the 90s, like most 80s people did.
Mm-hmm.
And because nobody's running around listening to John Bon Jovi in the 90s, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
But then It's My Life came on. If you remember, that was on Now 1, Now 2, one of those really early ones that we had.
Yeah, I believe so. On one of those early ones. I loved that song when it came out.
Yeah, I've never really been a fan. I might have liked it when it came out.
That's what I'm saying. I liked it when it came out. I'm good
this.
on it now. But when I was a kid, I liked Bon Jovi. But I didn't know he was part of that song. That was really cool.
I didn't know that either. Yeah, that's huge. It seems to me that people are like, yeah, we need a shot in the arm. Let's go get Max Martin. Like,
dude, that's what I'm saying. Dude, like as I was going through the research, I was like, man, is Max Martin my favorite musician? My favorite artist secretly?
Yeah, he's got the golden touch.
But anyways, later in 2000, or later that year, Martin partnered with Tom Talamoa, or
Taluma?
I don't know. I feel like he's missing a few letters, but I mean, I can't tell you how to spell your own name. And
yeah, that's true.
Anyways, they started up a new production company called Maratone in January of 2001 and moved to the Cosmos Studio building, which was in Sweden still. That's one thing. He now has a house in LA and Sweden, but typically any artist that goes to record goes to Sweden to record with Max. And
makes sense.
Yep. And anyways, the first
is he still in this Cosmos studio today?
I believe so, actually. Although he probably has another studio he works in over in LA as well, which I'm not sure of which one. He might hop around in LA, but I do believe he's still in this Cosmos studio building over in Sweden. The first album that they worked on under their new label was Britney Spears' album Britney, which was released in October of 2001. And I'm not gonna lie, the studio hit a bit of a cold streak until 2004. And a little bit of this, I remember Martin says he had his daughter. So there's like a little, you can definitely see like a break. I think it's between 2001 and like 2000, is it 8? Where he doesn't have a number one. And that's also right around the time where his daughter's born. So he wasn't as engrossed in the music scene. I do also think this is about that time where he said Pharrell was kind of killing it.
And Pharrell's kind of behind the scenes at that point, right? Because
Pharrell.
The first time I remember ever hearing anything about who Pharrell was Happy.
That's because it was his first singing. And so that's what, like, we know Pharrell from some of his like vocal
and features. I know he'd done a bunch of stuff before then.
Yeah. And so when I went and looked him up, and I was like, oh my God, he was part of like tons of hip hop stuff all throughout this time, not as vocals, but as a producer. So that's why I was like, oh my God, Pharrell's been part of way more music than I had initially thought he was. So, because of course, after Martin gives you a shout out, I got to go look you up a little bit.
Yeah, for sure.
But anyways, like I said, the studio was a bit on a cold streak till 2004 when American Idol star Kelly Clarkson took a trip to Sweden to work on her second album. And the first song that Martin was a part of was Since You've Been Gone, which barely missed number one at landing at number 2.
Really? I always thought that was a number 1. That's crazy.
I know, right? Yep. Only hit number 2. And then the second song was Behind These Hazel Eyes, which hit number 6 on the Billboard 100. The drought was kind of over with the Billboard 100, but still no number 1s. Unfortunate.
That's crazy. All these, and it's definitely worth saying that, we're measuring it in number 1s, but number 1 is such an insane goal. Every song we've talked about so far, only like 2 or so have been number 1, but they're all massive songs.
And they're all like top 10s too. Like they're all had potential to be number 1s. That's the crazy part.
Anything in the top 10, like you've probably heard of, you've probably heard.
Yeah.
So, in 2006, we're up to 2006 now. Martin worked with Pink on 3 songs from her platinum selling album, I'm Not Dead. And he worked on the songs You Plus Your Hand, Who Knew, and 'Cause I Can. And 2 of those songs broke the top 10 on the Billboard 100. I actually have to immediately rescind what I said because those broke top 10. I have no idea what those are. I've not heard any of those to my knowledge. Maybe if I heard them. But anyway, Pink summarized working with Martin by saying, quote, "Stop, take a deep breath, simplify." I like that.
Yep.
Along with most people saying, and most people have said that when they work with Martin, there's always a ton of laughter in the studio, which is always super important. Keep the mood light, keep it creative, keep it feeling good.
Yep.
In 2006, Martin also worked with Daughtry on a single from his first album, Daughtry. And I definitely had that album. Chris Daughtry came in second on American Idol, I think.
I thought it was sixth, actually.
A lot of people, was it sixth?
It was sixth, which is the craziest thing.
Yeah, a lot of people felt like he should have won. I mean, he's got an incredible voice, and
he got what he needed out of it.
Still does tons of stuff. Yeah, for sure. It's actually probably better that you don't win a show like that because then you're just the guy that won.
Yeah, he actually.
Although Kelly Clarkson won, so.
The early stars did really well, though. Like in the beginning, American Idol actually did what it set out to do. So like Kelly Clarkson, Carrie Underwood, like those artists won and got kind of what the show promised. But then as it went, it became like the number 1 person stopped being as big of. We were actually talking about, my wife and I were talking about this while we were listening to Max Martin's and talking about all of this. But oh my God, I just lost my train of thought. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, with American Idol winners, we were talking about which ones have actually done it. It's like Carrie Underwood, Kelly Clarkson, Daughtry, and like Adam Lambert. And that's like...
Yeah, but Adam Lambert did not win, or did he?
I think he did, but even if he didn't, he's still one of the bigger ones. And we're not even talking about winners, just people that go on to be
just people, yeah. Well,
big.
Caleb Johnson, he actually did win. He's from Asheville, a local guy, right near us.
Oh, gotcha.
And he's just an absolute monster singer. Granted, he's not very well known, but he did go on to be a part of like Trans-Siberian Orchestra and stuff like that.
Okay. So,
but he sings like rock and roll, like he went out and did like Led Zeppelin covers and stuff like that. And the dude just has a monstrous voice.
Gotcha.
Like the second you hear him sing, you're like, oh God, yeah, you should win. I don't even need to hear anyone else.
So after he worked,
Daughtry has kind of like one of those voices too.
Yeah, true. So after he worked with Daughtry, he actually worked with Avril Lavigne on her I believe her third album, The Best Damn Thing, and helped write 2 songs from it.
I remember that one. Yeah.
Yep. So
and the single, by the way, the single he had for Daughtry's first album was "Feels Like Tonight," which is a really good song, and it charted at number 24 on the Billboard 100.
Not bad. So
not bad at all.
Now Martin would return to his writing, return to writing number 1 singles in 2008 when he worked with Katy Perry on her debut album. In the interview I watched, Martin said that Katy had originally released a Christian album under the name Katy Hudson and also had a few troubles with some labels dropping her. And so he brought her in and just loved her singing ability and her songwriting ability. At the time, like I said, she did some Christian stuff. So it's just like her and an acoustic guitar was like the old Katy Perry. Very much cool. Yeah, right.
Lady Gaga has something similar where we talked about it before, but her first album, which I think her name, just under her real name, which I believe is Stephanie Germanotta or something like that. It's just her and a piano. It's like really good stuff too.
Nice. So Katy Perry and Max would actually combine to write 8 number 1 hit singles over the course of their time working together, which is the most he's worked with any individual, or most number 1s he has with any artist. And on her debut album, One of the Boys, that's the name of the album, was released June 17, or 2008. The big number one hit from this album was I Kissed a Girl. And Martin recalls seeing TV interviews in America where reporters were interviewing parents about the outlandish song and how the song like really angered like the religious communities of America. And so Martin was just seeing all this slander on TV and he was like, this is awesome. This is great. Look at all the publicity we're getting. This is
you could like to pay to pay for the same amount of publicity would be millions of dollars.
That's what I'm saying. He literally was like, this is so awesome. Absolutely loved it. And of course that helped blow that song through the roof. That song was everywhere at the time.
Yep. He also wrote Hot and Cold from the same album. That landed top 5 at number 3, which is crazy. I thought Hot and Cold would have definitely been one of those 8 number ones. That's insane that Katy Perry was so big. Like I definitely remember, she ruled the like 2007 to like 2010 era. It seemed like, when you're out on the boat in the summer and it's just every boat driving by is playing. That's, you know what I mean?
Yep.
Just because they have the radio on or whatever.
Oh, I remember.
And I thought Hot and Cold would have been one of those 8 because I don't know a lot of Katy Perry songs except the big ones. I don't know that I could name 8 of them. So that's crazy to me.
We'll see how many of them you recognize. I recognize almost every single one of her number ones. So,
yeah,
but
I bet. Yeah.
In that same year he worked with Katy, he actually worked with Pink again on her 5th album, Funhouse. And Martin would co-write the lead single, So What, which was their first number 1 on the Billboard 100 together.
So he's hitting a stride.
Oh, yeah. Martin also helped write the other singles, Please Don't Leave Me and I Don't Believe You. And the former of the two would hit number 17 on the Billboard 100. During the recording section for Funhouse, Martin Pink actually wrote the song What Do You Want From Me, which would end up being released by Adam Lambert and reaching number 10 on the Billboard 100. So
I remember that song. That was a good one.
It was a good one. I didn't know it was written by those two and passed along. It's so cool to see who writes what
crazy,
and who performs it.
And now that you mention that, Pink totally could have done that song as well. That feels like it feels right,
Yep.
But that's I was just gonna say something about this. It's crazy that like when you do an album, right? There's 10, 12 songs, whatever. You work with different groups of people, so you might have go to this guy to write to, go to this guy to write to, go to this guy to write to. Everyone that Martin writes is like the ones we know.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's what I found.
Why wouldn't you go to him for all of them? I assume maybe you want some variety or maybe budget.
Yeah, he's never a part of the song that
he's got to be charging $500,000 a song or something,
Right. There's never a song. That's what I did learn is like when an artist goes to work with him, it's always one of their big songs that he's worked with. It's never one you've never heard of. Like, that's what it's like. That's why I was like, it's almost impossible to not have heard of any song that Max has touched.
It would be, you'd have to go to some.
You would have to only listen to like
Country Without Power or something.
I was gonna say you'd have to listen to like 3 records from before the 90s and have no access to the internet or the world around you, and only get to listen to those 3 albums that your parents had or whatever. That's the only way you don't hear of Max Martin, I think.
Yeah, that's crazy. So he started off. We're at 2009 now, working with Kelly Clarkson again. So he helped write the lead single from her 4th album, My Life Would Suck Without You. I'm just now realizing that's Kelly Clarkson. I know the song. I didn't realize that was her.
Yep.
That song would top the Billboard 100, giving Martin his 5th number 1 single. Dude's got 27. We got quite a few more to cover.
Yep.
He continued his 2009 by teaming back up with Britney Spears for her 6th album after the two took a break from working with each other. Had to see other people. You know how it is.
Yep.
So he'd worked with her on her first 3 albums, and then Britney just took a break from the teen pop scene in general, did 2 albums without Martin. She requested Martin specifically for her 6th album, Martin Obliged, and then helped write the song 3 for her compilation album, and that song would be Martin's 6th number 1 hit single. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it makes sense. Britney, you got the first number 1 ever with Max Martin, so I feel like when she calls, he's like, I gotta help her out,
Yep. She said 2 albums did not go well without you. I need you back.
Yeah.
So we'll move along to the next year in 2010, where Katy Perry would release her 2nd studio album, Teenage Dream, which released August 24th, 2010. And Martin would help write 4 number 1 hit singles from it. 5 if you count the single that gets released with the reissued deluxe edition of the album. So basically 5 number 1s. Those are California Girls, Teenage Dream.
I know that one.
E.T., That one had Kanye. That one had Kanye West, and if I were to play it, you've
the title. But
I was gonna say you've heard it, but maybe only once or twice. And then Last Friday Night, TGIF.
Yeah, I don't know that one.
Really, that one was really big. It's got a music video, and then Part of Me.
Maybe if I heard it, and I don't know that one either.
Those
are all number ones. That's crazy. I'd have to check them out, but maybe I've heard them. I've probably for sure heard them, but
I couldn't believe that one was the number one. But all of those would reach number one on the Billboard 100. Absolute crazy album, by the way. Jeez. I did not know that a lot of these songs were from the same album because the singles were released over the course of like 2 years. So like when we were listening to them on the radio, I didn't know they were all associated to this one album, which is just, God, what a knockout, dude. Anyways, after this album, Martin got back in the studio with Pink and helped to put together a couple songs that she would just use on various projects, not necessarily any specific album. The first song they'd work on was Raise Your Glass, which landed at the Billboard 100's number one position. I love that song. I remember when that one came on the radio. And then he also helped write Fucking Perfect and the song Just Like Fire from the soundtrack to Alice in the Looking Glass.
Okay.
And then Martin continued
Not familiar with any of those.
Yeah.
I don't follow Pink very closely, so.
I had one Pink album, but I remember when Raise Your Glass came out.
Yeah. I had the one that goes shit. I'll be determined, you'll be kissing my ass. That one.
Oh, that's right. Early Pink.
That was like, what's the hook on that one?
You better get this party started. Dude.
Yeah.
I'm coming up, so you better get. That's right. That's right.
That's the one.
Man, that's like the only Pink song. Early.
I know that she comes out sometimes at Guns N' Roses shows and sings with Axl. I know that.
Oh, I didn't even know that. That's cool. But yeah,
so does Carrie Underwood.
Yeah, I only really knew Raise Your Glass. I didn't know the other two songs. But they're from the movie. Like I said, I think she did a version of the song on Alice Into the Looking Glass, which I don't think I've seen that whole movie.
I haven't seen the second one. I've seen the first one. And when I say I don't know the songs, it's I should more say I don't recognize the titles. I probably have heard them at some. If you play it, I might be like, oh yeah, of course.
Yeah, I haven't seen the movie, so I don't think
title.
I was like, I don't think I've heard those two. But anyways,
no, same.
Yeah. So Martin moved along, went back to working with Avril Lavigne on her fourth studio album, Goodbye Lullaby, which he helped write 4 tracks from. What the Hell, Smile, Wish You Were Here, and I Love You.
Dude, I'm just now realizing what a crime it is that Avril Lavigne and Adam Levine haven't done some sort of collab. And just call it Levine.
Levine.
Just spelled wrong. Other 2010 projects included Martin working with Usher. We've seen him, an alum of the show, on his song DJ Got Us Falling in Love. That was a big one, which hit number 4 on the Billboard 100. Number 4. The two would actually work together again in 2012 when Usher was working on his 7th album, Looking for Myself. Of course, the word 4 is the number 4. Martin helped him with the hit Scream. Not familiar with that one, are you?
I am not.
Also in that same time period, somewhere in that like 2010, 2011 timeframe, Britney Spears and Martin teamed up again for their final Billboard 100 number 1 hit single, Hold It Against Me, which was on Britney's 7th album, Femme Fatale. I don't recognize that one either. I
didn't until I heard the song, and I was like, oh my God, this was Britney Spears? Literally, I was like, I had heard the song on the radio a ton, had no idea it was her. It's like a dance remix. It's the
I don't know.
I'm trying to remember the hook. I'm trying to remember the hook because the hook is super, super familiar. You make me feel like paradise. I
got it pulled up here to check after.
Yeah, listen to it real quick. It's just like a famous dance song from the radio then. But I had no idea it was Britney. It blew my mind. I was like, oh my gosh. But I'll move on while you listen. Martin and Katy Perry hit the studio again when she put together her 3rd studio album, Prism. Martin helped co-write the singles Roar and Dark Horse, which both hit number 1 on the Billboard 100.
Yeah, I definitely know both of those.
Yeah, and this is where I was like, I know Katy Perry is a really good artist, and she's very talented and stuff, and and you can tell she's a judge on American Idol now, and just from some of the comments she's said, I can tell she's very smart in the studio. Like, you can just tell. But at the same time, I was like, I didn't know that she was almost made by Max Martin in a way. Like every big song she has was written with Max. So like it left me thinking like, where would Katie's career be without Max Martin right now? Not that it wouldn't be
Probably
nothing.
in a very different spot.
Yeah, I was gonna say not
sure.
that it would be nothing, but I can't imagine it'd be anywhere near the level of success that she's
She
reached.
probably calls him once a month and be like, dude, thank you for this mansion.
Right? That's what I was just thinking.
I just got another boat. Just wanted to call and say thank you,
Thanks.
dude.
Yep. But anyways,
I was singing roar, or really paid for this boat. I appreciate it.
anyways, the two would also work together on her fourth album, Witness, and would co-write a few songs, most notably Chained to the Rhythm, which peaked at number 4.
I do not recognize Chained to the Rhythm. And to me, that sentence there that you just said feels like that's the back of the bell curve there, you know?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Another come together for a fourth album and only one of them, and it peaks at number 4 after 8 on the other one before, and then 2 on the one before.
That's all
So
8,
it's like,
right?
you know,
I think they combined for 8. So they had 1 off her first album,
6 and 2.
5 off the
yeah.
second, and then 2 off the third.
I see what you're saying.
Not
So 8
bad.
total.
Not bad of a career, man.
That's a good run.
If you only did 3 albums, that would be a pretty successful 3 albums.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways,
So that brings us to 2012. And Martin gets a pretty cool phone call. A young country artist who had written 3 albums already was looking to make a genre swap and needed to learn from the best pop songwriter there was. And that's 22-year-old Taylor Swift gave Martin a call, and the two would team up on a total of 3 albums of hers. And their work began on the album Red, which is a fan favorite, as we know from the Taylor Swift episode. Shout out episode number 3, I believe. The first song they did together was We're Never Ever Getting Back Together. I do know that one.
Yep.
Martin actually explains the story of how that song came to be. So it was Taylor's first time in the studio with Martin, and Maroon 5 were recording in the studio next door. I love stories like that. A friend of Maroon 5's comes over and tells Martin he needs to go say hi to Taylor. So Martin's hesitant, but the friend convinces him that he and Taylor are friends. Turns out Taylor didn't even know the guy, and he just came over to pass along a message to her from one of her exes. Nice.
Yep.
After the guy leaves, Martin comes back in and apologizes to Taylor, says she was really cool about the whole thing. So he asked her what the whole thing was about. She said one of her exes was trying to get back together, but that, and she quoted, "We are never, ever getting back together." Martin responded with, "That's pretty harsh." Taylor said, "We are never, ever, ever getting back together." Martin and Taylor were laughing about the whole thing, and Martin said that sounded like a good hook to a song as a joke, right? The next day, Taylor showed up and said she took what Martin said and ran with it. She'd put together the structure for the song, and the rest was history. That's a go-getter right there. I love that.
Right.
Martin also helped on 2 other songs from the album, I Knew You Were Trouble, which peaked at number 2 on the Billboard 100, and 22, which didn't chart. Really? Is that the one that goes, but I'm feeling 22?
Yep.
That didn't chart?
Yeah, I know.
How have I heard that song a million times everywhere and it didn't chart?
So it might have charted maybe when it got re-released on the Taylor's version. That's possibly why you've heard it, because it might have been released as a single then. But also with Taylor Swift,
I've heard that song before the whole Taylor Swift thing with the Taylor's version. Like I knew that song.
That's right. Yeah. But also with Taylor, it's so weird, dude. Like she'll have like the radio songs, but then just like other songs that blow up because the fans make it blow up. And so I never know what's like, it was so weird doing that.
So that's with radio though. Fans can't make radio blow up. That's not how that works. You have to like, a label has to like pay money, say this is the song we're pitching, like blah, blah, blah. So that's really interesting how that works. I'm not sure. Like fans could make something blow up on YouTube or, Spotify or whatever, and then maybe the label's like, oh, we got to put it to radio. Maybe. But as far as blowing up radio, like that's a conscious choice. That's not a fan driven thing, which, maybe it should be. Radio's also stupid expensive. We've had quotes for our songs like 30, 40, 50 grand for like 4 weeks or something like that. It's like, yeah.
Jesus.
Okay. That's why you don't hear local bands on the radio.
Yeah.
And it sucks because they kind of box out little guys, because, Taylor Swift's like, yeah, sure, do 10 of those. Like,
right.
Little artists are like, I guess we're screwed. Anyway, to get back to it. At some point during that same time with Taylor, Martin actually helped write the song One More Night for Maroon 5. And that was another one of his number 1 hit singles. Yep. I've lost count of where we're at, but we're probably in the teens.
I think we're right around. Oh, yeah, because Katy Perry bumped us up a ton. Yeah. So we're probably in double digits now. The next album the two worked together on was Taylor and Martin, by the way, 1989, which of course was her real breakout pop album, more so than Red. Red was like the transition. There were a couple pop songs. 1989, the full pop album. And Martin helped co-write 10 songs from the album. The singles he helped with were Shake It Off, Blank Space, Bad Blood, Wildest Dreams, Style, and New Romantics. Shake It Off and Blank Space and Bad Blood all rose to number 1 on the Billboard 100. And this would put Martin at 20 on the number 1 Billboard 100 list.
You know what's crazy is like, dude has to have the fattest royalty checks out of anyone in the industry.
Right? I'd love to.
Because right, if you're Taylor Swift, like you're killing it with royalty checks, but she doesn't have 27 number ones. She's not even close. Like, you know?
Yeah.
Like, he is. So he's getting the money from Taylor Swift, from Katy Perry, from Britney, everybody. Every quarter that check's coming in. That's got to be millions every quarter.
Yeah, dude. And then with just your track record, like, gosh, there's never a shortage of phone calls. You're like,
and he's got the liberty to be like, yeah, I don't really feel like doing that, you know.
Yeah,
and, he doesn't have to do it for the money, and on top of he could just shut down everything and live forever. His generationally, his children's children for on these royalty checks.
Oh yeah, for sure.
He's continually got people coming in, and they got to be paying a freaking astronomical fee. You know, because I'm Max Martin. Why would I get out of bed? Like,
I also just think he loves doing it. You know.
Yeah,
not to say that affects anything, but I mean that I'd assume if you love doing it, it would prevent you from your prices becoming unobtainable.
I love doing it too, but I got a house in LA. I got a house in Sweden.
I know. I'm sure he gets his stuff paid for, but at this point, like you said,
yachts.
At this point, like it's only got to be for the sport of getting number ones or for the love of music. At this point,
dude, it's got to be for the love of music. Otherwise, don't do it. But that's why anyone does it. Hopefully. In 2014, Martin would work with Ariana Grande for the first time on her second studio album, and that's called My Everything. He helped produce 3 singles from the album. The first was Problem, which peaked at number 2. The second was Break Free at number 4, and Bang Bang, which was number 3. I know Bang Bang. I don't know the other 2.
Yeah, Ariana
Bang
Grande
Bang was the one with like 8 features on it, right?
I think so. God, what album was it? I think it's I can't remember whose album it was. It's a future one. Oh, I think we'll get to it, but there was one album I looked at that was recorded at like 14 different studios. I was like, what? Like where it lists the studios under, that it's associated with, there were like 14.
For Ariana Grande?
No, I'm trying to remember what, I think it was Adele, but there was like one of the albums I looked at that he was a part of,
like,
where you go to a different studio per song is what it felt like. You know what I mean? And work on a different song.
It's probably less that. It's probably like the pianist was in South Africa and he did it at his studio, which was called Piano Guy's Studio. And then the guitarist was in the UK and he did all the guitars and sent them over. And his studio is called, freaking awesome guitar studio, whatever. Like, and they all have these different names, but it's usually someone's just like bedroom or something.
It just reminded me of the songwriter list on a hip hop song, but for an album, but studios to an album.
38 songwriters to be like, look at me now.
Look at me now. Man,
it's like, did you guys each didn't like? That's too many to even come up with a word each. Like, how did this? Did you just credit everyone in the cafe you were writing it in? Like,
right. Anyways, we'll move on. The two Ariana Grande and Martin would team up for her third album as well. But before that, he actually went and worked with The Weeknd on his second studio album, Beauty Behind the Madness, and he helped co-write and produce 3 songs from the album. The first was the lead single, Can't Feel My Face, which was Martin's 21st number 1 hit single on the Billboard 100, and the other 2 songs he helped write were Night and Shameless. And
In the Night,
and Shameless. And he followed up by doing some producing work on Starboy as well, but no individual songs were credited. But back to Ariana Grande, like we were talking about, who brought Martin back to work on her third album, Dangerous Woman, which was released May 20th, 2016. He worked on a few songs, including the singles Dangerous Woman, Into You, and Side to Side, which all peaked within the top 20 on the Billboard 100. And later in 2016, Martin would actually team up with Justin Timberlake to write a song for the new movie Justin was playing in, Trolls. They put together the song Can't Stop the Feeling, which became Martin's 22nd number 1 hit single on the Billboard 100. And Martin actually won the Polar Music Prize in 2016 as well, which is, thank goodness, the reason I was able to do some decent research on this episode, because he did an interview the day before, which is like the only interview there is of Max Martin, like almost exclusively.
Wow.
Dude,
I love that.
Dude does not put his face out there very much. Like, you just, and even
Not
some,
interested.
even
Just
some of the
wanna write
comments,
music.
dude, even some of the comments were like, as an aspiring producer, you guys don't know how rare this interview is and stuff like that. So it was great. It was a great listen.
Yeah,
It was
awesome.
a little over an hour long. I recommend it for anybody.
Oh, yeah, for sure. In 2017, Martin would help Taylor with her 6th studio album, Reputation. So Martin helped out with 8 total songs from the album, including the singles Ready For It, Endgame, and Delicate, all 3 of which charted in the top 20 on the Billboard 100. Additionally, in 2017, Martin worked on Katy Perry's 4th album, mainly co-writing the lead single Chained to the Rhythm, which peaked at number 4 on the charts. I think we talked about that.
Oh, that's right.
earlier
I
as
said
well.
that. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, he's on. So I don't think they have teamed up for any number one
No, I
since
think that
then.
was the last one, yeah.
I don't even know if he's still helping her with I didn't even look up. Is Katy Perry still like putting stuff out, or is she just not working with Max anymore? Because maybe Max doesn't work with her anymore. I'm too big for you now.
Yep.
Just I've achieved better things. Okay, she's released 2 other albums since then, and okay, Max is still listed as a producer, but I guess he's not a songwriter. Oh no, he's only listed as a producer on her. I see, on her 5th, but not her 6th.
So producer and writer, 2 different things too. So it's interesting that he can kind of cross both worlds.
Right.
Usually you would go to a songwriter if you're really hiring out, a whole team.
Mm-hmm.
You would go to a songwriter, or maybe just hire a songwriter or buy one of their songs or something. And then you would take that to the producer and be like, all right, let's create this song. And then, then take it to the mix engineer, the mastering engineer, and then you finally have a product. So there's several different stops along the way, but it seems like Martin does most of the work in the beginning half with the writing and the actual production of the song.
Yeah, it seems like he does a huge part of it.
He's probably not like twisting a bunch of knobs. Like, he's not one of those guys. He's more of a
no. He
big
probably has
picture
an
creative
engineer
guy.
that he works with. Yeah. Anyways, the following year, after working with Katy, in 2018, Martin worked with Ariana Grande on her 4th studio album, Sweetener, and he co-wrote the singles No Tears Left to Cry, which peaked at number 3 on the Billboard 100, and God is a Woman, which peaked at number 8. And he would also help co-write the single Break Up With Your Girlfriend, I'm Bored, in 2019 on her 5th album, You Next. So those 2 started working together.
Is it called You Next or Thank You Next? Because I know Thank You Next.
Is it Thank You Next?
I think it's Thank You Next. I know that song. I'll move on while you confirm.
Yeah, I was going to say,
before fully moving to 2019, one last thing to mention about 2018 is this is the last year that Martin has won the ASCAP Songwriter of the Year. But don't feel too bad for him, because that actually made it his 8th consecutive year winning the award.
Yep.
So basically he won it every year of the 2010s.
Yep, 2011 to 2018. Absolutely crazy. And it is Thank You Next. I apologize.
Thank You Next. Ariana
I
Grande.
left out a word.
Some other cool stuff that happened in 2019, by the way, include Martin teaming up with Ed Sheeran and Justin Bieber on the hit I Don't Care, which came up just short of another Max Martin number 1 hit at number 2.
How many number 2s has he had,
could have been
right?
28.
Yeah.
Yeah, it could have been 28. Yeah. Martin also appeared as the keyboardist on 2 singles by Coldplay. That's awesome.
Yep.
The singles are from their 8th studio album, Everyday Life. Martin appeared on Orphans and Champion of the World. This would lead to Martin producing their 9th studio album, Music of the Spheres, which was released on October 15th, 2021. Some of the bigger singles that Martin produced were Higher Power, which hit 53 on the charts. That's Coldplay, right? That's a killer song.
Yep.
Let Somebody Go, featuring Selena Gomez, which hit 91. And finally, My Universe, which features BTS, which hit number 1 on the Billboard 100. This was his 25th number 1 single. And if you've been paying attention, you'll notice that we skipped 2. And that's on March 20th, 2020. The Weeknd released his 4th studio album, After Hours. Martin was a part of the 5 songs, or just 5 songs from this album. Those were Hardest to Love, Scared to Live, Blinding Lights, In Your Eyes, and Save Your Tears. I'm not familiar with any of those, but Blinding Lights and Save Your Tears would both go on to top the Billboard 100, giving him his 23rd and 24th.
I feel like if I were to play the beginning of Blinding Lights, you'd be like, oh, because it's got like this electronic intro that ran the public ear for a minute. It's got the
Yeah. That could be for sure.
Yeah, that one's really good. And then
That's The Weeknd.
Yes, Save Your Tears was also. I had heard it, but I didn't recognize the title or even the beginning a little bit until I heard the chorus, and I was like, okay, I've heard it.
Okay.
So okay. I bet they're both ones you'd be like, all right, I've heard it around. But once again, I'm with you. Like when it comes to hip hop titles of songs, you got me. Only my ears can recognize hip hop, not my eyes. Yep. Anyways, in 2020, this would mark the first time that Lady Gaga and Martin would work together. And they co-wrote the single Stupid Love for Lady Gaga's sixth studio album, Chromatica. And that song would peak all the way at number 5 on the Billboard 100. But let's get back to 2021. I know we had to go back to 2020 there for the sake of the timeline. In 2021, Martin got a call to work with Adele on the single Can I Get It from her 4th studio album, which was called 30. The single hit number 26 on the Billboard 100. And it was after hearing the song I Knew You Were Trouble by Taylor Swift that Adele said she had to work with whoever, like the people who wrote that song. And Max Martin was the people who wrote that song. So I also learned Adele can play guitar. I didn't know that. This is the one I was talking about. She actually brought the guitar melody from this song to the table. So they had been working, I believe Max said they had been working on it for like 3 days, just trying to get something. And she came to him on the 4th day with this, and he didn't even know she played guitar, but she brought up this little guitar melody and they worked with it and ran with it. And that song, I don't know if you've heard it. I had to go and listen to it for the first song, but I Knew You Were, Can I Get It by Adele is like not her normal sounding song and also not Max Martin's kind of normal song. So they both kind of like did some, like it's got a lot of acoustic parts. It's got some interesting vocals, like very interesting setup of a song that was unique. So I really liked what they came together to do in that one. But
yeah, true. That brings us to this year, 2024.
Yep.
Because Ariana Grande released her 7th studio album, Eternal Sunshine. That was released on March 8th, just a few months ago. I remember that. There were only 2 songs on the album that did not have Martin credited as a producer or co-writer. He was a part of 3 big singles from the album. The first was Yes And, which earned Martin his 26th number 1 hit single. The second single from the album was We Can't Be Friends, parentheses, Wait for Your Love. It's a long-ass title, which also hit number 1. Long title didn't stop it from hitting number 1, and that is his 27th and most current number 1 hit single. The third single was The Boy Is Mine. That didn't do too shabby either, hitting number 16. So
it was good to see Ariana.
I mean, the dude is just unstoppable.
Right. It's good to see Ariana Grande finally hitting number 1 with him, because they had just started, working together for her most recent, and they constantly were hitting like 2 and 3 and like getting top 5s, but just not getting that number 1. So it was really cool to see them both finally get some number 1s this year. And honestly, that makes me really excited, because that was just one album he worked with that just popped out 2 number 1s this year. So that's why we were talking about it's so like obtainable. He could break the record by the end of the year. We don't know who he's working with and what albums are going to get released, but within the next couple of years he could pass Paul. So that's why we're so excited. We're so excited.
He just
for
pumped
this.
out. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. Like
well, that brings us to our ratings. I'm going to take a guess here, and these ratings, I guess, will have an asterisk on them because he's not an artist, and he's been a part of so many different artists, which I think gives him a pretty big advantage. But I think this is going to be one of the highest rated ones we have.
Yeah, I was thinking about it ahead of time, and I was like, I think this is kind of with the John Williams type of level where But
even John Williams just did music for John Williams. You know what I mean?
Yeah, true.
Where Max Martin is working with so many different artists. It's like, hey, I'm not the biggest Weeknd fan, but maybe I'm the biggest Backstreet Boys fan or the biggest, Katy Perry fan. So it's like he's got so many shots at. I mean, it's just the dude's smart.
Yeah,
it's like if you open one business, you might fail, but if you open 30 businesses,
I'm over here trying to think. Right. Everything is like a 5 of 5, maybe a 4 out of 5 on creativity, and maybe a 4 out of 5 on emotional connection for me. Those would be the only non-5s. But
I was going to say 4 out of 5 on creativity as well. Wait, real quick though, we should go through.
We'll just do them real quick. So we're
for
both
the listeners
at a 4
that
out of
don't
5?
know, because we know how this goes, but listeners might not know how we rate. So we rate out of 5 different categories: creativity, replayability, cultural impact, emotional connection, and nostalgia factor. We rate each of those on a schedule of 5, or a what's the word there? It's not schedule. Out of 5, and on a scale of 5.
Scale. There's the S
There we go. Found it. And then we average them at the end. So Ashton's got a 4 for creativity. I'm going to match him on that just because Max Martin, very creative, obviously does his thing, but he does his thing. It's his thing. You go to Max Martin for a Max Martin sound. Yeah. You're not going
not for him to try something new.
He doesn't tend to deviate a ton from his lane. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, he knows what he's good at.
Replayability. I mean, he's got 27 number
5
ones.
Out of 5. Oh yeah, dude, it's so easy.
Cultural impact, 5 out of 5, because the only person that tops him is Paul McCartney out of every songwriter that's ever lived. He's past John Lennon even.
I actually discussed with Nicole about, I was like, do you think Max gets a 6 out of 5 like Taylor? It's close, but not quite. My thing is I have him at a 5 because his face isn't out there.
Yeah. You can't walk up to someone and be like, do you know Max Martin?
Yeah.
90% of people
his
are going to be like,
music
no.
is a 5 out of 5 on cultural impact, but he himself, I guess, isn't. Right. And so that's why we'll keep him at the 5.
His music's probably like a 6 or a 7 out of 5.
Yeah, right. It's
but he himself is like a 3 out of 5. So we're averaging that to 5.
For emotional, I'm actually going to put a 4, one of my higher ones, just because a lot of the Backstreet Boys music and stuff, like listening as a kid, yeah, it's nostalgia, but also at the time, like as a kid, you really find a way to emotionally connect to music. And
yeah, and most of his hits, I'm putting a number 4 as well for a lot of the same reasons, but not a 5 because, most of the number 1 hits are poppy. There's not a lot of like deep emotion to them, like California Girls, We Wear Daisy Dukes, shit like that. It's like, that's not a heavy thinker. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I'm not really super connected to it, but the music is amazing and it's all good. So I got a 4 out of 5 there. Nostalgia factor, I think, for both of us.
5 out of 5.
It's right at a 5 out of 5, just because, he's the sound of every summer from 2007 to right now.
Yeah, right.
Every single summer, every boat trip, every, drive, everything.
Yeah.
So we average those out.
This was one of the easier ones to listen to as far as...
he's coming in at a 4.6 out of 5 for both of us, I believe.
Woo. Love it.
That's the highest rated one we've had, I think, right?
I think we defaulted John Williams to a 5 or a perfect score on him, but if we're talking about ones that we actually did go through all the ratings individually and stuff, I do believe this is our highest score.
Was John Williams the highest? I'm going to go back and confirm.
I was pretty sure we just wrote out a perfect 5 out of 5 for him.
Oh, our ratings are not included on the sheet here. So
that's what I'm saying. I think we got to the end and we were like, he's just a 5 out of 5 for us.
I think you're right. I think 5 out of 5. I'm looking at all of these. I can't see John Williams getting less than a 5 on any of them. So yeah.
Yeah. So
John Williams is the king.
John Williams, the king, right by Max, followed by Max Martin.
Max Martin coming in big behind him, 4.6. Wow.
Awesome.
It's a big step up for me from Lil Wayne last time.
Right. almost 3 points.
I'll take it. Hey, this was a great episode. I hope everybody learned some stuff about the king of songwriting.
Right? I learned a lot. I really enjoyed this one. And this is the most, as you see by the scoring, this is the most nostalgic episode I've had thus far. Literally just got to listen to my childhood the whole time.
Yep.
But that'll do it for us here today. That's been Max Martin.
Maximus Martino.
Maximus Martino, his evil villain name.
There you go.
We'll have to send that to him.
Well, epic episode. I'm excited for next one. I think next week we're going to hit up more of our 500 albums. It'll be part 4, so look out for that. We're closing in on the ending there. Until next time, it's been the Melomaniax boys.